History often pretends that justice is final. A trial ends, a sentence is carried out, and the world convinces itself that the story is over. Evil is punished, order is restored, and the page is turned. But some legacies do not end with a verdict. Some survive in bloodlines, whispered beliefs, and quiet loyalties passed from father to son. This is one of those stories. In May of 1962, Adolf Eichmann was hanged. One of the principal architects of the Holocaust stood before the law and was executed in full view of the world. His ashes were scattered into the Mediterranean so that no grave could ever exist. No stone, no marker, no place for followers to gather and turn murder into martyrdom. Officially, the story ended there. A monster punished, a name condemned forever. But Eichmann's story did not end at the gallows, because 4 sons were watching. Within months of their father's execution, 3 of Eichmann's sons were already drifting toward violence. They built crude bombs. They spoke openly of revenge. They discussed attacks on Jewish targets, including children. The ideology their father had lived by had not died with him. It had taken root inside his family. To understand how this happened, you must understand the world they were raised in. After escaping Europe in 1950 through Vatican-assisted escape networks, Eichmann did not disappear into anonymity. He did not live in fear or isolation. Instead, he settled in Argentina and built a quiet, stable life. He found work at Mercedes-Benz. He moved freely through Buenos Aires' German expatriate circles. He attended social gatherings, spoke openly, and lived as though the war crimes trials unfolding across Europe had nothing to do with him. By 1952, he felt secure enough to summon his wife, Vera, and their 4 sons. Reunited in Argentina, the family settled into a comfortable middle-class routine. What makes this period remarkable is not simply that Eichmann was free, but that his children lived openly under their real name. They did not hide behind an alias. They did not use Clement, the false identity Eichmann had adopted. They used Eichmann. They walked into classrooms, introduced themselves to teachers, and made friends while carrying the surname of one of the most wanted Nazis still alive. For nearly a decade, this worked. The family was protected by a dense web of Nazi sympathizers who had also fled to South America, and by an Argentine state that saw no urgent reason to investigate its German immigrant population. The boys grew up watching their father treated with respect. They saw him welcomed, listened to, and admired. Slowly, they learned a dangerous lesson, that his past was not a source of shame. It was something to be proud of. In their closed world, genocide was reframed as duty, and history was rewritten around dinner tables and community halls. This upbringing left its mark. The sons were not taught remorse. They were not taught responsibility. They were taught loyalty to their father, to his beliefs, and to the version of history he defended. That illusion of safety lasted until one careless moment shattered it. The weakness came from the eldest son, Klaus. He had inherited his father's arrogance, but none of his discipline. In the late 1950s, Klaus began dating a teenage girl named Sylvia Hermann. She was German-speaking, attractive, and kind. And Klaus wanted to impress her. What he did not know was who her father was. Lothar Hermann was a Holocaust survivor. He had escaped Germany before the war, but not before Nazi violence had left him permanently blind. Now he lived quietly in Buenos Aires, raising his daughter within the same German community that unknowingly sheltered the man responsible for his suffering. One evening, Klaus was invited to dinner at the Hermann home. Trying to appear important, he began boasting about his father. He explained that Ricardo Clement was not really Ricardo Clement at all, but a former high-ranking Nazi official, a man of significance during the war. Lothar Hermann sat at the table, silent. He could not see Klaus's expression, but he heard every word, and he understood immediately what he was hearing. That night, after Klaus left, Hermann began making inquiries. Slowly, carefully, he contacted Israeli intelligence and passed along what he knew. A son's careless pride had exposed a secret his father had protected for years. Israeli agents moved with caution. For months, they observed the man known as Ricardo Clement. They studied his routines, his habits, his family life. They needed certainty. Arresting the wrong man would be catastrophic, politically, diplomatically, morally. The confirmation came on March 21, 1960. That evening, agents watched Clement return home carrying a bouquet of flowers. He handed them to his wife at the door. It was an ordinary gesture, but the date mattered. March 21st marked the 25th wedding anniversary of Adolf Eichmann and Vera Eichmann, married in 1935. In a small act of affection, the truth had revealed itself. 7 weeks later, on May 11, 1960, agents seized Eichmann on a dark street as he walked home from a bus stop. He was forced into a vehicle, taken to a safe house, and held in secret for 10 days. Then he was smuggled out of Argentina, disguised as an airline crew member recovering from an injury. The final confirmation came from an unexpected source. When Vera Eichmann filed a formal complaint with Argentine courts over her husband's disappearance, she made a fatal mistake. In her own legal filing, she stated plainly that Ricardo Clement was Adolf Eichmann. In trying to bring him home, she officially confirmed his identity to the world. What followed would change history. For the first time, a Holocaust perpetrator would stand trial not before victorious Allied powers, but before the people he had tried to erase. Justice would not come from conquest. It would come from memory, and the legacy Eichmann had tried to protect through his sons would be dragged finally into the light. The Jerusalem trial opened in April 1961 and immediately became something the world had never seen before. For the first time, Holocaust testimony was not confined to court transcripts or history books. It was broadcast across the globe. Survivors who had remained silent for years stepped forward and spoke publicly, some for the very first time, recounting what had been done to them while millions watched. The trial stretched on for 4 months. The evidence was crushing. Eichmann was exposed not as a distant bureaucrat, but as a central organizer, an administrator of death who managed genocide with spreadsheets and schedules. He coordinated train timetables and camp capacities with the cold efficiency of a logistics executive, treating mass murder like an industrial operation. His defense, that he was merely following orders, just another replaceable cog, fell apart under the weight of documentation and testimony. On December 15, 1961, the court delivered its verdict. Adolf Eichmann was found guilty on 15 counts, including crimes against the Jewish people and crimes against humanity. His family responded with a final plea. Together, they submitted a request for clemency, asking Israel to spare his life. The appeal was denied, but Israel made one extraordinary exception. Vera Eichmann was granted a secret prison visit. The conditions were strict and personally enforced by Foreign Minister Golda Meir. No more than 24 hours in the country and immediate departure afterward. Vera traveled to Ramla prison and was allowed to spend time alone with her husband in his cell. What was said between them in those final hours remains unknown. She never spoke of it. No transcript exists. Whatever passed between them vanished with the closing of the cell door. The execution was meant to end everything. On May 31, 1962, 1 minute after midnight, Adolf Eichmann was hanged at Ramla prison. He became the only person ever executed by the State of Israel. Within hours, his body was cremated. His ashes were scattered over the Mediterranean Sea, beyond Israeli territorial waters. Nothing was left behind. No grave, no marker, no place that could be turned into a shrine. Every possible path to martyrdom was sealed shut, but no one had accounted for the sons. What followed defied every expectation. One might assume that a family forever linked to the most publicized Nazi trial in history would retreat into silence, change their names, disappear, and live in shame. That did not happen. Within months of the execution, 3 of Eichmann's 4 sons moved in the opposite direction. Klaus and Horst formed a neo-Nazi terror cell in Buenos Aires. They recruited other young extremists, stockpiled weapons, and openly displayed their allegiance. Police surveillance later recorded swastika flags hanging in the windows of the Eichmann home. Horst wore a Nazi armband inside the house, as if the war had never ended. The brothers assembled Molotov cocktails, gathered firearms, and distributed propaganda throughout the German immigrant community. This was not nostalgia. This was continuation. They were not honoring their father. They were attempting to finish what he had begun. Their targets included Jewish institutions across Buenos Aires. Police reports from 1962 described plans to bomb a school bus carrying Jewish children. The sons of the man who had organized the deportation trains were now preparing to murder children on their way to school. When Argentine authorities finally raided their base of operations, they uncovered weapons caches and piles of Nazi material. The evidence was undeniable. Horst was convicted and sentenced to roughly 2 years in prison, an astonishingly light punishment given the scale of the plot. Klaus was released for what the court described as insufficient evidence, despite weapons being found in his home. Neither brother ever renounced their father. Neither expressed remorse. They simply continued living their lives, older but unchanged, their beliefs intact. But one son chose a completely different path. Ricardo Eichmann was only 5 years old when Mossad agents seized his father on a Buenos Aires street. He had no memory of Adolf Eichmann as a free man, only of the trial, the execution, and the shadow that followed. After the hanging, Vera took Ricardo back to Germany. She raised him there but imposed one absolute rule. The past was not to be discussed. Her husband's crimes were never explained, never examined. The subject simply did not exist. Ricardo grew up knowing who his father was, but with no guidance on how to understand it. He chose education instead of ideology. He studied prehistory and archaeology at Heidelberg University, earned a doctorate, and built a career entirely detached from his family's name. Eventually, he became director of the Orient Department at the German Archaeological Institute in Berlin, one of Europe's most respected research institutions. In 1995, Ricardo gave an interview to Israeli newspapers that stunned his family. He stated openly that he was glad the trial and sentence had taken place. As an adult, he said, he had no relationship with his father. Of the 4 sons, he was the only one to publicly condemn Adolf Eichmann. The family fractured along a fault line that mirrored Germany itself. 3 brothers clung tighter to denial and extremism. One chose to confront the truth and walk away. Their later lives reflected that divide. Klaus died in Germany in 2015 from Alzheimer's disease. He never uttered a single word against his father. He carried his beliefs to the end, unrepentant. Horst died the same year in Buenos Aires from cancer. His longtime partner later described him as a committed Nazi who believed his father was innocent until his final days. Swastika flags still hung in his home. Dietrich, the quiet middle brother, chose neither extremism nor condemnation. He chose silence. As of 2018, he was reportedly still alive, living in a Buenos Aires apartment only blocks from where his father had been captured nearly 60 years earlier. He has never spoken publicly, never explained, never denied. Ricardo retired in 2020. He lives in Germany, far from his brothers, having built a life untouched by his father's legacy. He proved the name did not have to be a curse if one was willing to reject everything it represented. Israel scattered Adolf Eichmann's ashes to deny him a shrine. Instead, his family became 4 living monuments, 3 to an ideology that refused to die, and 1 to the possibility of breaking free. Vera Eichmann died in 1997 at the age of 88. She spent her final years reading the Bible and refusing to speak of her husband. She never acknowledged his crimes, never expressed remorse, never publicly confronted what her family had become. The lesson is deeply unsettling. Proximity to genocide does not guarantee moral reckoning. The sons who lived longest under Eichmann's influence became the most radical. The son who barely knew him was the only one capable of condemnation. His ashes dissolved into the sea. But ideas do not scatter so easily. Hatred survives through conversations at dinner tables, through boasts to girlfriends, through flags hung in living rooms. Execution does not end ideology. Cremation does not erase belief. Only one thing stops it: the individual decision to reject it. And that choice, history shows us, is far rarer than we would like to believe.